I'm going to tell you what to expect in a machine shop class or machine shop principles, intro to machining. If you're studying engineering or engineering technology, you might need to take that class or a similar class. In my class, we had to build an air engine as the final project. So I'll talk about some of the things I learned while trying to get to this point. Okay, I'm gonna go over like the main tools, and I'll talk about drawings a little bit, and I'll also talk about my experience and comfort level as an older student versus the younger students. So first, the tools. The main tools you'll use in a machine shop or a machine shop class would be the lathe. Now, the lathe is this big metal thing, and it spins your workpiece. Your workpiece, in my case, or in your case, it might be metal. And the lathe, I guess, revolves the piece, and then the blade goes in. So while the piece is spinning, the blade goes in, and you wind up cutting the shape. Think of a baseball bat or the spindle on a railing. To get that shape, you'd have the piece spinning and then the blade going in at different depths. So that's what the lathe does, and you're going to learn about which sort of I don't want to say blades, but they really call it tools. But just think of a blade. You're going to learn like what sort of blade to use with which type of metal, what sort of speed or what speed you should operate at, and how fast you can advance the tool into the metal. All right, that's a lathe. You'll also be required to probably learn and identify all the parts of a lathe, because it's really adjustable for whatever you're trying to do. If you're trying to move the workpiece up or move the tool in or out, the cutting tool in or out, your instructor is going to expect you to know how to do these things and how to refer to these parts without calling it like a whatchamacallit. All right. Then you have a mill. Now, the mill also cuts metal. It looks kind of like a drill, okay? But what it does is, instead of the piece spinning, right, instead of the workpiece spinning and the blade moving in, with the mill, the blade or the tool spins, and then you drive it down into the workpiece. So picture a platform. Picture your workpiece here in a spinning. Just think of a drill. Think of plunging a drill into it. But it doesn't just plunge. You can also work your way around the workpiece. So those are the main tools, the lathe and the mill. But you're going to use hand tools as well, like files. For instance, if you're cutting a piece like this square here at the bottom, you're going to have rough edges. So you might use a file to kind of knock the burr off of the edges. Okay, you're going to use other hand tools, screwdrivers, awls, pokers, all sorts of stuff. If you're interested in like engineering or engineering technology, you've probably pictured yourself looking at a set of drawings. And this class is exciting because here's where you really start to work with those drawings. And for my project, I was given a set of drawings, right? For that air engine I built, there's an exploded view of the engine here on the front page. But each page contains a drawing of one of the parts for the engine. And you're expected to go through and understand this drawing or these drawings. It lists like what material you're supposed to use. It lists like what sort of tolerances you have, and it lists dimensions. And you're going to be expected to accurately cut your pieces to within thousandths and tens of thousandths of an inch, depending on the tolerance of each piece. And each piece might have a different tolerance. So you're going to have to develop a level of competency in that area by the time you finish that course. So I think I had like eight or nine pages for this drawing, for this project. What else? So here's the air engine. Like I said, by the end of the class, you will have built every piece, almost every piece of this engine. Like, we didn't build the bolt, we didn't make the nut, but by the time you finish this course, you'd have the competency to maybe build, to cut one of these nuts. Could you? You could, and you could probably make a bolt. I mean, we made this piston, we made the piston, but the piston was CNC. So that means I didn't manually cut this piston out. All right. But I learned to write a program where I would tell the program the shape that I wanted this piston to be, and it would cut it for me. So we were required to use the CNC mill, which is, I guess, robotic. You program it, and then the manual mill and the manual lathe, which is what we did, where we pretty much cut by hand. Well, not by hand, but we had to dial in or advance the cutting tool using a hand wheel, back it up using a hand wheel, and then there's like a digital monitor showing us like where we are as far as tens or thousandths of an inch. So this was cool. So we started with the exploded view. We went through each page and built it piece by piece. And on the last day of class, we had to assemble our air engine and run it. So when I say air engine, there's a hole right here where a fitting attached to an air hole is screwed in, and you pump air into the engine and it runs, right? And your professor might have a requirement. Ours had a requirement where the engine had to run for a certain amount of time at a certain PSI, right? If your engine wasn't made, if the pieces weren't made within tolerance, then the engine could seize up, right? That piston could seize up in here. So that's how we knew if you were proficient or not. Okay, so we were required to run the engine for a certain amount of time, and I think most of our engines did work by the end of class. But I want to talk about my experience as an older student versus a younger student. Okay, now I actually took this class a long time ago. The first time I went to school, I did not pass it. This time around, I really found it to be easy. Okay, I got an A, but you know, people talk about the experience of an older student and learning technical things. This is one of those classes where you're going to shine if you have an aptitude for mechanical things, or if you just have experience building things. And I think many adults, maybe most adults, have some experience doing some sort of technical work or building or constructing, especially if you're interested in engineering and technology. What I found was, like, most of my classmates were like 18, 19, 20, and they weren't really comfortable. They were afraid to use the micrometer. They were afraid to read the tools down to thousandths and tens of thousands. And they came to me really for advice. Like, they could tell I was just more comfortable. I was answering questions. There was just a lot that I knew coming into the class because of my experience in life, like building things and, you know, working with wood and just being around. So they gravitated. And there was another guy who was about my age or maybe younger. He had maybe a little younger. He had military experience, and he breezed through his project. And I'm not saying that young folks will always struggle and older people will always have it easy. I'm just saying, if you're trying to get an idea for how the class might go and how it feels actually like moving through the courses, I think often you're gonna get that sort of experience where you being the older student kind of have an advantage. That was my experience this time. I mean, the kids were coming to me over and over, and I'm like, bro, some of this stuff is like I'm learning just like you. I'm seeing some of this stuff for the first time, but I guess I just had a confidence, and they heard me answering a lot of questions and stuff too. So that's what you might experience in a intro to machining class. I had a lot of fun. I built an engine, and also I'll add this: where I work now, They have engineers, they have PCB testers, they have a machine shop at another one of our facilities. So this is like real world. This is really applicable if you get into science, technology, engineering. You might really need these skills. So it was practical and it made sense. So if this video makes sense to you, you found it valuable, watch another video. All right, and if you want me to talk about this in more detail, let me know and we can run it back. See you soon.